Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back, Kizza. How are you doing, my UK friend?
I'm doing very well, thanks yourself.
I am just lovely. Today, we're actually going to talk about something interesting. It's a personal, reflective, philosophical model, as well as a good argumentative tool, not necessarily for providing gotcha moments, but more of a meditative practice tool for making better arguments and improving your own stance on things. Kizza, my friend, how about you tell us about your new model, your new mirror model idea?
Yeah, I call it the mirror test.
The mirror test. Ah, yes.
Yes, yes. We're not having any Kathy Newman mentality here. Uh, yes.
If you get that
To
reference, leave a comment down below and let us know you got that
yeah,
reference.
yes. So the idea of the mirror test is a philosophical test to show whether you, as an individual, are a principled individual who practice what they preach, or just a massive hypocrite.
Right. So before I ask you questions and we get into particulars,
Yeah,
tell me,
yeah.
as I would read it in a textbook or hear it in a lecture in your class at college, or university rather, tell me about
Yeah.
the mirror test. Break it down for us.
Okay. Okay. To mirror test, as a simple explanation, you are standing in front of a mirror. The mirror itself shows a true reflection of who you are as an individual, from politics to social aspects to style, etc. It shows who you truly are as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
The test is to see if you accept your true image and you walk away with pride, or do you resent the image and smash the mirror out of spite?
Right. And there's only those two
Yes,
options.
yes.
So, uh, is there any more to go along with the synopsis of this theorem?
Well, that's the a simple explanation.
Okay. So, uh, you're saying that as a helpful tool for philosophical stance and looking at yourself to see the reflection of your argument. The purpose of this is to say, if I see what I truly am or what I truly represent, do am I ashamed of it or am I satisfied with it? That's basically what this means, right?
Yes.
So tell me a list of examples of how this is applicable and who should use it and why.
Okay, for a good example, regarding the toxicity of the political landscape as we see today,
Mm-hmm.
it has, thanks to social media, made it very easy to spot the hypocrites in the crowds, within the crowds of people.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me, especially with those above us in the economic sphere, seem to hold a huge wave of hypocrisy in terms of their attitudes toward people, economics, and their social status. And they almost all seem to be guilty of doublethink.
Yeah. So you're saying, tell me about to give me an example. How is this useful? You are applying it to them because you can't just make someone you don't know or a politician stand in front of your magic mirror. Tell me how you, as an observer or a philosopher, will use the mirror test to help you prove things or to see things in this example person.
So, for example, with this concept, you take an individual who holds a certain idea, whether it be
We'll use a good
regarding
one.
economic.
We'll use diversity as our
Yeah.
strength. Let's use that one.
Okay. Diversity is our strength. Okay. That's a good one.
Right.
Now, an individual, if they truly believe diversity is our strength, should, by and large, live in the most diverse communities within a country and embrace all that wonderful diversity they claim to love. However, what we consistently find is these people who claim to love diverse live in neighborhoods that the likes of the KKK would call paradise.
Wealthy, white, gated communities, clean, unified religion, very few outsiders, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Now, this, as anyone's listening to this, would be a classic red flag of pure hypocrisy.
Yes.
And to quote a classic phrase, what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
I like that phrase.
Yes, and this is clearly an example of doublethink, as in they're acting as well as holding two completely contradictory positions and believing them both. Now, anyone who's read excuse me, anyone who's read 1984 or watched the movie will know exactly that the phrase comes from there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with these, let's say, Twitter socialists, I would say, would perhaps give a classic phrase. If these people were forced, quote unquote, to stand by their political ideas as well as their economic ideas, they would become victims of their views very, very quickly, and will almost definitely end up bankrupt and homeless.
And at least miserable.
Oh, and very, very miserable.
Right.
Because if they claim to support various socialist politics, then they also don't support concepts such as private property. Now, if they don't support private property, one of the biggest private properties that people like to have is housing. If you don't support private property, then technically speaking, you should not be allowed to own a house. In which case, if you do own a house, you should be thrown out of that house.
And for those who preach the diversity is strength thing that also believe in some modern manifestation of Marxism and communism, it's not just that they shouldn't own the house, it's that it's the people's house, it's the community's house.
Exactly. So they should be. So their front doors should be completely open to anyone who wishes to come in.
As well as sharing the clothes and the food they have with whoever needs them.
And especially their wealth. Because these are not people who are exactly poor. These people are living at large for the most part.
So that's an example of who you could apply the mirror to outside of yourself. Give me an example of how you can use this mirror to look in yourself.
Okay, a good example of someone who, let's say, for example, look at yourself. Let's say a lot of people who claim to support freedom of speech. Now, for me, I don't know how I'm not sure how the audience stands on this, but when it comes to subjects like freedom of speech, I regard that as an absolute concept.
So do I. You and I are both free speech absolutists.
Yes. Now, not to pull the classic Obi-Wan line of only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Which is completely ridiculous.
Well, that is an absolute statement.
I know.
Therefore, he is a Sith Lord.
Right.
And therefore, Anakin is completely right to call him an evil and a Sith Lord, and therefore for him to try and slice him into multiple pieces. So with that, I do see a lot of people regarding those who claim to support freedom of speech be perfectly all well and good, happily support various social censorship mentalities against their enemy.
Yeah. I've noticed that a lot too.
And they effectively become the very thing they swore to destroy, to quote episode Star Wars again.
A more topical reference would be iDubbbz, who is famous for his content cops making completely hypocritical statements about a certain event that happened recently, and then using DMCA takedowns on people that were dissenting, even though his video response said that he didn't care. That level of hypocrisy. Yeah. That's what you're talking about.
Oh, yes. Quite a few YouTubers are extremely guilty for this.
Yes.
I mean, yes, and honestly, YouTube. Yeah, YouTube's already been is already very toxic as it is, but that's just adding a higher level of spitefulness and toxicity that's just not.
Yeah.
So that's so. And one great thing about this idea is it's from as far as I can see, completely universal and non-discriminatory.
Because anyone could apply it to any stance on religion or philosophy or politics to look into the magic mirror and have the truth of what it is you project into the mirror gaze back at you. And you are either satisfied with it because it passes muster, or it shows you what is wrong and you are thusly ashamed of it.
Exactly.
So,
Now,
go
and
ahead.
here's the
Sorry.
yes. Now, with this though, a good example of another piece of hypocrisy, which was somewhat talked about loads years ago, but sort of died down a little, is the excuse me, is the hypocrisy amongst conservatives when it comes to marriage and divorce.
Mm-hmm.
As in, I see a lot of so-called conservative types are perfectly acceptable if they being involved with various forms of adultery or abortion when it's them. However, they constantly speak out against those types of things against anyone against everyone else.
Right. Oftentimes in America, there are hilarious, fun scandals that are revealed where religious or moral majority conservatives who have made their success in being politicians on moral purity and family sanctity getting busted with gay male prostitutes. That's always fun to read.
Of course, because surely if you are a quote unquote traditional conservative, homosexuality should be out of the window.
Of course.
But of course, but yes, and so it is. So you could literally, as you said, apply this to anyone about anything.
So this
Now,
this makes me think
yes,
that you could use this to help build something that was popularized a few years ago by the intellectual dark web types, the Sam Harrises, the Ben Shapiros, that kind of thing. A concept known as steel manning. I don't know if Sam Harris came up with it himself, but he was the first one I heard say use it or heard use it. The concept of a steel man is the opposite of a straw man. A straw man, for those who may not know, is an argumentative tactic where to try to win or get a point over on someone in an argument, you create a straw man, a easy to burn or easy to break effigy of the opponent's position or idea. Something easy to light on fire, something easy to break. You create the weakest stereotypical or shallow representation of their idea or stance that you can, and then you attack it because it's easy. Steel manning is the concept of doing the opposite of that. You want to be able to have the most strong, cohesive, bold, and accurate version of your opponent's stance or idea to lock horns with, because then you're dealing with the truth of the matter out in the open. And if you can defeat that, then you have truly won. You haven't just pulled a fast one over, and it has merit and lasting argumentative value if you are able to defeat the steel man instead of just petty short-term value of gotcha points for defeating the straw man. So I would think that if you are concerned with argumentation or delivering philosophical ideas like I do on my channel, like many of the people that we know like to do with social media, we can use your mirror test. And on our own, we can say, okay, well, I feel very adamant about this facet of nationalism, or about this element of political adjudication. Well, I want to look at this in the mirror and see how in my life I exemplify this, or how I'm hypocritical with this idea. And you can shave off the pieces that would make you ashamed, or wouldn't be a truthful reflection of that in the mirror. And it's sort of a good planning tool, philosophical model for you to use on your own to quote unquote build steelmans of your own ideas and platforms. That's what I see value in the mirror test for.
exactly. Yes, and how I came about with this idea is due to my background in engineering.
Mm.
where we effectively try and build things that we can't break, no matter how hard we try.
And you said you've primarily worked with automotive engineering for racing companies.
Well, I specialized in motorsport engineering.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah, so it's about making, so you take your product and you try and make it as light as possible, as fast as possible, as strong as possible, and as efficient as possible.
Right.
Now, those four things, there is a lot of contradictions within those four things.
I imagine price of materials will be one because there may be a way that you can dramatically increase efficiency of one thing, but that material would cost so much it wouldn't make it cost viable for market.
Well, for example, in let's say in the very top levels of motorsport, the material you use for the bodies and for the body or monocoques is carbon fiber. The reason for
Mm-hmm.
that is it's the best material in terms of lightness versus tensile strength.
So it can get bumped and not fall apart, but it doesn't weigh much.
No, like to give you well to if you were to use a element to describe it, it's similar to titanium.
Okay, sounds
The only
good.
difference is titanium is hard to come by and expensive, whereas carbon fiber itself, if you take what's known as dry carbon fiber, quote unquote,
Mm-hmm.
it literally is like a sticker. And what you do is you basically take your stickers, quote unquote, lay them up in molds, make it airtight, make sure it's all completely airtight. Then you vacuum the entire thing in like a vacuum bag, and then you stick it in an autoclave, which is a pressurized oven,
Do you
and you
put
put it in
something?
there for like
Do you put molding in it for the shape you want, like lightweight fiberglass or cardboard that
yeah.
gets crushed, or what? Like, how does it
Well,
work?
you have a mold. You have a mold to give you a shape that you want,
Mm-hmm.
and you lay up your pre-preg carbon fiber. It's called
Mm-hmm.
pre-preg. You line it all up into the shape you want, and then you vacuum it because the pre-preg itself is basically made of like a weave, a carbon-based weave that's weaved together with a matrix,
Hmm. Interesting.
which is a resin.
Well,
And
that's certainly
basically,
cool.
and that's what, yeah, and that's known as a composite. Whereas you take a raw material like a matrix, and
Mm-hmm.
then you have your resin, and they fuse together to create a strong material.
Okay, I got you. So go on.
So if you want a less high tech version of that, it's like a mud straw brick.
Okay.
The mud is your resin, and your straw is your reinforcement. You put them together, you create a mud straw brick, which has strength, but also which has strength. So you could effectively build a house out of it, for example. And it's the same with not only materials like carbon fiber, but it's the same with plastic, same with fiberglass, and so on and so forth. Now, the
And
benefit
so,
of these
since you
types of
work with
materials,
that a lot in engineering,
yeah,
this is where the idea for your mirror test came from.
yes, because like I said before, not only in the world of motorsport, it's very similar in the world of war and the, dare I say, the industrial military complex. You're always trying to push the envelope of what's possible.
Right.
So
I
if you think
followed
of,
F1
let's
for a few
say,
years, and it was like that. It was
yeah,
absolute cutting edge,
yeah,
very cutthroat. You know, if you can shave off this tiny percentage of this here and there, that might be the difference of $100 million worth of placement or ads next year, that kind of thing.
exactly, yeah. So to like for example, if you consider the top racing cars as like fighter jets, well, what do you want from a fighter jet? To be very, very light, to be very, very strong, to be highly
High speed,
maneuverable,
high
high
maneuverability,
agility,
that kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah, high speed, high maneuverability, and to murder your and to beat your enemies.
Right.
It's very similar. Now there is a lot of contradictions, you could say, within those statements, because a lot of materials that are strong are not necessarily light, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Like making something very powerful but also very efficient are contradictory statements.
So,
But you push the
excuse
envelope
me.
on
Sorry.
both sides. You push the envelope on both sides to get the best results. Now, you don't get a perfect solution. you tend to get trade-offs. Although sometimes with certain technical evolutions and revolutions, you can get the best of both worlds.
Well, tell me how you use the mirror test in this kind of thing.
So, for example, well, when it comes to engineering, your main big three factors are cost. What's the word? It's a question of, I think about the triangle. It was cost, speed, and time.
Mm.
Those are your big three. Now, obviously, there are extra points you could add to that, but they're the basic three. Now, something that may take high cost and high time, something that may cost a lot of money and take a lot of time to make, you can make an argument despite those two flaws, because the third one, it flies off the scale.
Okay.
So, for example, something like carbon fiber, it's expensive, not necessarily because of the material itself, but because of the facilities you've got to have as well as the skilled labor. That's where the real cost comes in.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, if you take the pre-preg form, it's literally like a sticker, like one of those stickers you pull out from a sticker box. You pull it off the thing from its main thing and you stick it on something, and that's it.
Interesting.
Yes. But obviously, we can't fight. But even though it costs a lot of money, it takes a lot of time to make. The final result of the material is something that's extremely strong and extremely light.
So, in working in all this, what made you develop or codify your mirror test concept?
Well, with this, because of my background in motorsport engineering, not only are you building something to push these envelopes, but you're always, not only are you pushing these envelopes for the materials to get the best you can out of them, but you're always trying to break them along the way. So, for example, you tend to quite often take a piece and take it well beyond what it will normally do just to see what happens. So, for example, a good example of this, let's say we take we took like a sheet of material known as, of like a sheet of aluminium, for instance, like a 1 meter straight. And what we did was we put it on like a block, like clamped down, and we just took a hammer to it and just tried and just see how easy it was to bend or break it, for instance. That's one example. Now, for instance, if let's say I take something like carbon fiber and let's say good example, is take what Elon Musk did with his Cybertruck, where he was going to throw a rock at a side window. Yeah. Now, let's say hypothetically, instead of the window cracking, the rock bounced off. Like, what was that? Like, just bounced it off. Like, is that it? That will give the individual who's made it huge confidence. Now, from a service standpoint, to a consumer, that gives them huge confidence in the product. So, for example, a car with a carbon fiber chassis is incredibly strong, to the point where you could have an incredibly high-speed crash and the tub itself, or the main monocoque, will not break. And that gives huge confidence to the consumer who buys the product, but also who will be in the accident itself.
So you're saying that this type of thing is sort of the push it till it breaks, and that's sort of that's how you learn. And so that's where the mirror thing came from, is let's look into the absolute depth that we can take this thing to see how pure or how strong it is. And that's where your mirror test thing came from, was that?
Yes. Well, with the mirror test, if somebody has an ideology, what you're effectively doing is you're taking it to its logical conclusion.
Right. I believe ad extremis is what they talk about, like when you take something to dial it up to 11, that kind of thing.
Yes, there is that. So, for example, a good video I did watch on this was a guy who was demonstrating prop shafts for cars, and he had a steel one, like a basic steel one, and he put it on a torque machine, which will spin it up to a certain amount of torque, till it either bends or it breaks, and it'll tell you exactly how much torque it could take.
All right.
Before it happened. Now, when he did the steel one, it took about, I think it was 400 Newton, I think it was 400 foot-pounds of torque. That's twisting force, by the way, for those who are
Hmm.
unaware. Till the entire prop shaft just was completely twisted. Now, when they did another one with a carbon fiber prop shaft, the carbon fiber one was about, I think it was about half to a third of the weight of what the steel prop shaft did. When they put it on the torque machine, it spun up to around 1,300 foot-pounds of torque, which is a huge amount of
Wow.
torque. And then the shaft itself completely split in two.
Hmm.
Now, for instance, a prop shaft like that, it may not necessarily, it might only have to do at most, let's say, half that. But knowing you know that product can take well above what is needed, that gives you huge confidence
I see.
from a consumer standpoint.
And so when you apply this to people's or your own standpoints on things you believe in, like
Yeah.
philosophy, politics, religion, you want to have that confidence of this is really strong or this is weak and has a noticeable breaking point here. Maybe I could work on it.
Yeah. So, like, I'm sure you've heard of the example, a machine is only as strong as its weakest point.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what I'm doing is taking a machine and basically taking every single piece and making it to the best it can be of each individual component.
Yeah, I
Now,
get
when you
that.
do that to so when you do that to the entire machine, you end up with a vastly superior machine afterwards. Now, when
Okay,
you do that
so
to,
tell us
yes,
tell us a way that you have applied this mirror test to yourself or another person in regards to something that's a philosophical or political or religious standpoint. Have you done that yet? And how did you or the other person react?
a good example would be, let's say, for myself, is um, try and be more patient and reserved when it comes to arguing.
Mm-hmm.
So the mentality was, if I got angry, I've lost the argument.
Okay.
Even though I might be technically winning the argument in terms of the debate itself, if I've snapped or got really, really angry, then as far as I'm concerned, I lost the debate. So I'm
The
basically
mirror
making
showed you
myself,
something in that situation that you would be ashamed of, for example.
yes, for example, yes. So I'm basically making myself the subject or the guinea pig and giving myself absolute
Mm.
no expense criticism.
I
So
like
it's
this
similar
mirror
to
test
how
idea because it makes me think of Dungeons and Dragons, where you have a magic artifact and you can speak into it once a day or once a week or whatever, and it will show you the truth and the power of whatever idea or creature that you show the reflection of.
yeah, yeah. So a good example of this, you see people who a good example where you see this kind of mentality come about is with professional athletes. They're all, even if they're at the top of their game, they are never satisfied.
Right,
They always want more. They always want more. They always want that extra.
right,
In any sports it is. It could be anyone in basketball,
right.
NFL, football, motor
They
racing,
call
etc.
that the
They always
professional
want more.
edge. You always want to be on the professional edge, so you're always willing to take that extra step to get that extra 0.5% here or there.
Exactly. Now, I'm effectively taking that idea as well as other philosophical ideas that I've come across in recent weeks, such as the veil of ignorance,
Hmm.
and kind of putting it into a nice little melting pot, if you would. And you could say I created this mirror test
Well, I like the
out of
conceit,
it.
and it does have its uses.
Yeah,
I recommend you keep working on
yeah,
it. I think that if you think
yeah,
more on it and try to give it more legs, so to speak, share the idea
yeah,
around to other people we talk to in our
yeah,
Sargon iconoclast circle type people. Share it around
yeah,
on Twitter and on Discord and stuff, and see what comes back.
yeah,
Because this is sort of like how the whole conceit of Steelman came from. Maybe something really useful and ubiquitous will come out of this because I like the idea and the conceit. I feel like it still
Yeah,
needs to have some of the kinks worked out to be something catchy and super
yeah.
useful. So I definitely think this is cool and
Oh
we should
yeah, yeah.
keep working on it.
Oh yeah. I put it towards the Discord that I'm in, throwing
Hmm.
it around to a few people, and I so far I haven't had any negative results from it. Like I've heard of a lot of people go, "Huh, I never thought of it that way." But obviously there are a few little details which will need a little bit of tweaking, and that's due to, for instance, when it comes to politics, people who are quote unquote fence sitters, for instance,
Uh huh.
what happens to people who are, let's say, on the fence, or maybe those who don't have an opinion on?
Well, I think for people that are not as concerned
Yeah,
with the absolute truth or the unbeatable argument, this is not really something for them anyway, so it
yeah,
doesn't matter. It's for people like me,
yeah,
people like you, that care about systems or ideas to be formulated to be so unbreakable or so absolute that they're profound or unique, and others will see value in them. I'm that way with ideas and concepts, and you're that way with engineering because that's what you work with. So
yeah.
one
So
thing that
with
I would suggest about your mirror test is
uh-huh,
come up with uh, come up with a different name because the word
yeah,
test is sort of like a pass fail type of thing that has a correct answer. But this kind of thing isn't
right,
necessarily for getting an answer. It's for exposing weakness and I don't know, something like that. Maybe look up things in Greek mythology and call it like so and so's mirror or mirror of atrocities or whatever the hell. Like maybe give it a spiffier, snazzier name. That could be
yeah,
fun. Maybe work on that.
yeah, yeah. Maybe I need to look up more mythology and find something that would fit the bill. Um,
That could be fun. But when it comes to how we apply it, though, I like what it does. I like having this concept of okay, in my mind's eye, I'm going to conjure this magic mirror, and I'm going to put to the forefront of my mind, the nationalist arguing point or this conceit of a religious or spiritual stance, and I'm going to force that into a lens of truth and apply everything that I can think of to break it and look through the internet to find people that have arguments against it and try to see if I can find anything impure in it. Sort of like how how like they say. I think you might have said this the other day when we talked that all it takes is time and pressure to make a coal into a diamond or something like that, and sort of sort of wrap that type of idea into your mirror conceit maybe. I don't know, I'm just speaking artistically right now. I don't know,
yeah, just
severely
have a little
artistic.
search. Yeah, and maybe you could actually I could call it the actually I thought of a good one. How about the Mirror of Veritas?
Well, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Reason I say Veritas is I'm just reading in Roman mythology, Veritas is known as the goddess of truth.
Well, veritas means truth in Latin, doesn't it?
Yes,
Pretty sure it does.
but yes. So
That's
yes.
pretty cool.
So
I like that word. That's good. See, I like it better already than mirror test. That's pretty good.
yeah. So yeah. So we could call it that. And in general,
Or
so
if you
far
want
I
to be
haven't
even
had.
extra wordy with it, the mirror test of
Yeah.
veritas. That's pretty cool. That has a nice D&D sound to it.
Oh, I could. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, generally a lot of people so far haven't had any outright negative issues,
Hmm.
and so far most people have questioned what would happen with subject A. They get a I say I explain what would happen to subject A based on a logical conclusion, but ultimately, when it comes to certain subjects, it's going to be a lot of it is going to be partly down to my knowledge of the subject in question.
Hmm.
So that's one area of the flaw regarding an idea. But you could have multiple people giving input of what the quote unquote true ideals or the absolute uh, logical conclusion of such an idea is.
Hmm.
And then you
I don't know if that would
build
alter the
almost
name
like
or not, but I do see where you're going with that.
yeah, so effectively you could hypothetically build, let's say, a database for each individual idea, and then you have basically data for where it would lead to logical conclusions. And
Hmm.
then you could point out, and then also have a database as showing the hypocrisy within within the idea itself.
You
And
know,
then you have it all written down.
this could be a
So yeah,
fun way for us to have a web series together. Is we could take things
possibly yes.
that we love or care about, and we could call the series the Mirror of Veritas or something like that, or the Truths
Yeah,
of or not the truths, the Tests of
yeah,
Veritas, and
yes,
we could do research on our own, and take some popular ideas that are big in our circles, like free speech and freedom to assemble and that kind of shit, and
yes.
we could apply everything that we could think of that would be a situation to break it, and then make a fun little 10 to 20 minute video sharing our results and our findings together. And I could even do some graphics or some pop-ups to go along with it. That could be kind of a fun web series if you ever wanted to do that together.
Oh, that could be interesting. I mean, if we could get perhaps a couple of extra heads on board who would be down for it, it
Yeah,
could
that would
make
be
things a
nice.
little interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, because like a few people, because like for myself, where I stand on certain ideas, I do hold, oh, excuse me, I do hold what sounds like contradictive ideas, but it kind of follows with this idea of the mirror of Veritas,
Hmm.
as in, let's say, for instance, the Second Amendment.
Hmm.
I'm a Second Amendment absolutist, but those who don't support the Second Amendment, I would argue you have no rights to the Second Amendment, nor are you to be protected by people who support the Second Amendment.
Sort of a modern day expression of practice what you preach.
Yes, but turned up to 11.
No,
Or
I
as I
got you.
said
So you're
before,
saying that if you spend your time, let's use Twitter for example, because that's a big
yeah.
cesspool of bad arguments these days. And you are a
Uh-huh.
person that has pronouns in your bio and you're a blue check, and let's say you work for some shitty third leg legacy media outlet, and you use your
Uh-huh.
free speech directly to interfere with and censor other people's speech, you would be found in practice what you preach violation, and thusly you would give up your right to free speech, and you wouldn't be allowed, and you in turn would be censored, that kind of thing.
Exactly, yes.
Hmm.
So yes, so it effectively makes people, if this was forced at the international level, at the most extreme sense,
Hmm.
it would force millions, if not billions of people to think twice about advocating for something.
I
It'll
see.
force them to not only to think twice and actually ask themselves, do they want to do it? And then in a almost ironic twist, effectively create a much more, I want to use the word enlightened, but a much more
I think the word you're looking for is
critical,
mindful. It would create a more
yeah,
mindful. Yeah.
mindful, and I guess you would say thoughtful society overall.
Right. Sort of like how I'm a Second Amendment gun rights. I don't know if I would say
Yeah,
extremist, but I'm pretty adamant about it. I think the world, especially the West, would be a much safer,
yeah,
more responsible, more mindful place if from their earliest age, like 3 to 4 years old, everyone was taught how to wield a rifle and a pistol, how to use those things to defend yourself against people, and how to use them to hunt, and how to clean them, and how lethal and dangerous they are, and proper gun safety. And then everyone from like an age of 14 or 16 or whatever is not just expected to, but required to take a gun safety license class. And just like a driver's license, everyone is expected to at least every 8 years or whatever go and take their basic firearm knowledge and proficiency test. And everyone is heavily recommended or even enforced with taxes and penalties and stuff to be armed at all times. See, and I think that if we did that, we would have an almost zero crime rate. People argue with me and say I'm wrong about that, but I think that if you take the family values education, you grow up with firearms as part of your culture path, I don't think that it's the same thing as just dropping a million handguns into a bunch of uneducated morons saying everybody carry your pistol today, because then that's just opening up the floodgates for people shooting each other and having accidents and stuff. But I think that if you had a culture
No,
heavily
for sure.
steeped in gun ownership, gun responsibility, and using firearms for the tools that they're good for, which is creating a web of mutually assured personal destruction, like nuclear weapons do for international assured destruction, I think you would have a much more
Yeah.
polite and crime-free society. That's just my belief, anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, you effectively by default will naturally, if things go sour, create a massive Mexican standoff.
and on top of that, it also goes along line with
Yeah.
making sure that the people keep their government honest. Because if you know that 90% of your populace is armed and has been raised from childhood to be a good shot with a gun, and everyone has tons of weapons and ammo, it is going to make authoritarian corporations and governments think twice before just screwing over their populi, because they
Oh,
might. So I think that might be not just good for personal safety and low crime rate, it might really help to fight corruption that we see that runs rampant today in corporations and government.
for sure, for sure. Because I forget who said it best, but the damage is to I'm not sure if you heard the saying, speak very softly but carry a very large stick.
Yeah. That was, I think Teddy Roosevelt said that, I think.
Might have been Roosevelt.
I
I've
don't.
also heard of a.
I'm bad about remembering famous quotes with who said it. I'm not good at that.
That's
But
fine. Yeah, yeah.
I'm
That's
pretty
fine.
sure it
Yeah.
was
I
an
mean, I've
American
also.
president, and I think it was Roosevelt, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, fun fact about that's Teddy Roosevelt, right?
I think so. Because there was also
Yeah,
FDR, but he was the New Deal welfare guy. But I'm pretty sure that the guy that said
yeah,
that quote was the other
yeah,
Roosevelt. I think. But don't
yeah.
quote me on
Well, I
that. I'm
mean,
not good at remembering who said what with
that's fine.
famous quotes.
That's fun. That's fine. I mean, I do have a little fun fact for you regarding Teddy Roosevelt.
Go ahead.
Completely off topic, but he was actually the inspiration for Dr. Eggman from the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's funny.
Yeah, if you look up a picture of Eggman and compare him to
Mm-hmm.
pictures that you'll find on Teddy Roosevelt,
Yeah, I
there
can
is
see
a
it in my
very
mind.
much a
Yeah,
distinct
I can see
likeness.
it. So
Yeah, so
go back to topic.
yeah,
Your conceit of use it or lose it type of exemplary. We would call them First Amendment rights or Bill of Rights type of stuff in America. But you're talking about
yeah,
a codification of liberties and freedoms in your society where they are absolute, but the exception that proves the rule is if you purposefully go out of your way, not on accident, not with ignorance, but if you purposefully utilize a right to nullify or harm another person's right like that, it becomes jeopardized and taken away from you. Um, the problem that I would see in implementing that is human beings, if anything, are excellent at adapting and changing, not just generationally, but in the scope of a single human's life. So the question with this is where do you determine how long of a punishment or how long of a rights loss for that kind of reciprocity would last? Like a month, a year, that kind of thing? Is that what the courts would decide for punishment?
um, I think it depends on the subject in question and the punishment. So, for example, this is going to come off as quite extreme.
Well, that's
But I'm
fine.
sure you and the other viewers will see where I'm coming from with
And
this.
again, Susan
When it
WikiWiki,
comes
if you're
to
listening, this is all theoretical philosophy. This is not us encouraging any type of violence or gulags or anything.
yes, dear, we're not advocating violence. We're just discussing philosophical ideas,
Yes,
dear.
ad
Now,
extremis, which means we do
uh,
not support any type of violence or extreme behavior. This is just all theoretical stuff for the purpose of testing philosophical models. So please continue.
yes, yes. So this is going to sound very much overkill, but when it comes to the First Amendment, I would argue those who are not in favor of it and support various forms of censorship, I would argue
Like
to
forced gun
that person
buybacks,
has,
that kind of thing.
well, I'm more specifically speaking of the First Amendment here. And
I
when it
thought you were
comes to
talking about
freedoms,
guns. I thought you
sorry,
said Second Amendment. My bad.
no, no, sorry, First Amendment.
Gotcha.
With that, I would argue that if someone is very much opposed to the Second Amendment, like many people seem to be in American politics, I would argue that person should have their mouths sewn shut and have all access to telecommunications destroyed.
Hmm. So loss of the ability to have a telephone account, a mobile phone account, uh, cable internet, that kind of thing.
Exactly, yes.
Hmm. For
And
how
that would
long is the
last
question?
for,
What's the punitive duration for that?
I would say, a good year
Sort of
would
like
help.
how regular criminal punishment in America is called a misdemeanor, where it's the punishment is 1 year. They call it 1129, meaning 11 months 29 days.
Yeah, you could think of it like that. And I would argue that is enough time to make somebody a victim and make them realize the error of their ways, but short enough so it's not completely damaging to them from a social standpoint.
So if someone advocates or is an open advocate of forced gun buybacks and removing the rights of people to keep and bear arms, as long as they do that, that person gives up their right to own personal firearms and is not afforded the protection of the police who or the local militia who would afford them protection by utilizing that right.
Exactly.
That's interesting. That would be a very difficult thing to implement, of course, but I do see the philosophical merit of trying to make your community based upon that, because just like we were talking about earlier, it would make people have a constant state of mindfulness of, well, do I really want to advocate for this limitation on liberty and freedom because it's going to be directly and immediately applied to me? So I think that would be a really good, like, I don't know if you could ever actually implement that with law and our and criminal justice system, but philosophically, it's definitely a good thing to make your students and children think about. So, like, if I ran a martial arts academy, for example, that would be the kind of thing I would force my students to think on.
Yeah, so I mean, with the United States, it'll be very difficult regarding the Constitution because, in many ways, you could argue this entire idea is kind of defecating on the spirit of the Constitution itself.
Oh no, it totally is right, but I mean, it still has philosophical merit
Yeah,
for purpose of modeling ethics ideas and thinking about how to apply
yes,
not punitive, that's not the right word, but how to apply some kind of sensible reciprocity to those who would use the system against others to exploit what the system is to optimize their liberties while taking away others, that kind of thing.
yeah. So effectively, it's non-discriminatory, and also it's almost the ultimate equalizer between all individuals.
Right, because this kind of punishment, it wouldn't be in addition to prison time. It's just you have to navigate society at the loss of this at this basic right or protected or this at this basic right or protected liberty. You have to navigate life in society without that and without the service of those who benefit from it for 1129 or whatever.
Exactly, yes. So,
Hmm.
for instance, if someone became a victim of the First Amendment, I would argue after they've served their time, quote unquote,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure afterwards they would become a free speech absolutist right up.
Or at least sympathizer.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, because I believe, well, this is kind of not a direct quote, but a reference to Yuri Bezmenov, where he said, the ultimate enemy against a socialist or a communist is someone who is a former socialist.
Yeah, that's why he said the first people to die or the first people to be thrown in the gulag are the useful idiots and the ones who helped bring about the revolution.
Yes. Well, it's not just that with politics, but it's also the same with religion as well. The best person to take down a religious ideology
Right.
is a former major advocate.
Like Imam Tawhidi or that guy from America who was really big into the neo Nazis and did a lot of ugly violence in his youth and stuff, but then he repented and changed his ways and all that, and goes around talking about why racial and religious violence is just self destructive and doesn't do anything positive. Like I've heard that guy speak before several times. He's pretty cool.
Well, yeah, like for example, like a good example, I'm not sure if you heard of a man called Daryl Davis.
Doesn't ring a bell. Who is it?
He's a black musician, a musicianist who goes to KKK rallies.
They still have those?
Yeah, in very small quantities, but
I thought that was
he
a dead
goes to these
organization.
rallies. It's still around,
Oh wow.
but obviously it's very hard. But basically, he goes to go to these rallies, and he helps de-radicalize these people.
Oh cool.
And
That's
he
good.
basically simply, under no aggression, and he was on Joe Rogan's podcast a few months back,
Oh, I'll have to listen to
and
that
he
then. I
helps,
listen to a lot of his podcasts. I like Joe Rogan shows.
yeah, he helped de-radicalize a lot of people, and he even de-radicalized a few grand wizards
Interesting.
over time.
Hmm.
Now, you think it shows that the power of discussion and persuasion is an effective tool rather than the classic subjugation and outcast.
Right.
Because quite often you find that if you subjugate and outcast somebody, you could end up creating a villain in the
Oh,
shadows,
definitely.
which you
Yeah.
don't see.
I mean, that's one of the things that I wish I could remember the guy's name. I think it sounds Italian or part Italian. I heard him speak on a couple of people's podcasts. I think he might have been on Joe Rogan like 4 or 5 years ago. I know he did a thing with Sam
Yeah.
Harris. I listened to some of. It's this guy who was part of. I don't think it was the KKK. It was like some kind of violent inner city, white identitarian neo-Nazi group or something. And he did bad things and hurt people and that kind of stuff. And he, of course, had a terrible life. And one of the things he talked about was when you are discarded and forced away from everyone else, people who want to use broken, gullible idiots with nothing to lose will indoctrinate you and radicalize you to do horrible things that you probably wouldn't otherwise do or think made any sense. And he speaks a lot
Yes.
about how that's why good parenting and good communities and social groups and not treating people like pariahs because of wrongthink is so important, because you're basically creating an army of radicals that are going to do terrible things in your society when you do that. So he's kind of a free speech
Exactly.
absolutist, which I of course respect. But it was really interesting listening to this guy talk, and that's what that reminds me of. But oh man,
Yeah.
I was gonna make another
Yes.
point.
Because
Let me think of something. Oh, you go ahead. There's something else I was gonna
yeah.
say.
Because yeah. Because not only that, it makes it easy, and you just think across history how much bloodshed and violence could have been avoided if people opposing sides were willing to talk.
Mm-hmm.
Now you think, from a logical standpoint, why would somebody who's black turn up at a KKK rally? That from a logical standpoint sounds completely illogical.
Mm-hmm.
But and the funny thing is, sometimes uh, a lot of things in humanity tends to work in opposites.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have two opposites, you can create something beautiful out of it.
Yeah, the perfect
Like, for
example, in
instance,
my opinion, is the Streisand effect. The more the media
mhm,
tries to bury something in a hurry, the more it gets known and goes viral.
yes, like, or as I was going to say, it's a bit like it's like magma and water.
Yeah.
They're almost complete opposites, but when they come together, they create something.
Mm-hmm. I
So,
remembered
for
what I was going
instance,
to say earlier. Excuse me.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
about a year and a half ago, when I was
yeah,
really interested in trying to find out just how much I knew about life and people that was wrong, when I really started to to notice just how full of shit almost all mainstream media is all the time. Uh, from communities of mine, like I told you, out west and online communities between 3 and 6 years ago, because I'm not a
Uh-huh.
leftist and I wouldn't drink the leftist Kool-Aid, so that's so you get thrown off the island. But I I got labeled a white supremacist and all the other nonsense that idiot Twitter leftists call you and all that
Oh
other
yeah.
stupid shit, and
Oh yeah.
it really made me interested because it was they would tell me, "Oh, you got that info from a white supremacist website," and I'm like, "It's the Daily Caller. Like, it's about the most tepid, middle of the road conservative person that's on TV. Like Tucker Carlson. That it's Tucker Carlson's little news network thingy that he does, and it's like
Yeah.
for someone to call the most tepid, boring, boomer, neocon, mainstream, conservative, just basic jerk off news, white supremacist radical content, it made me really question, okay, well, if so many people that brand me alt right and call other people on YouTube I don't even know neo Nazis, and I know that they're wrong about Tucker, I wonder if they're wrong about these people. And so, for about 3 months, I went out of my way trying to find actual black and Jew hating neo Nazi radicals. And it was so hard to even find any to talk to when I was trying to find them. It made me really see through the boogeyman of the violent, radical, alt right, whatever. Because if I go out of my way for months just trying to find one to talk to and can hardly even find any of them using the internet, how big of a threat to anybody could they really be? And so that led
Exactly.
me to meeting a lot of white nationalists and a lot of ethno nationalists and white identitarians, black identitarians, people who were rather adamant with their beliefs about Islam and Judaism and that kind of thing. And I actually sat down and talked to a lot of these people. And I learned that even though the language that they used and a lot of the ideas they had would get them immediately branded as some kind of radical and booted off social media, they weren't bad people. They just had been ostracized and felt like they had no voice and didn't know any other way to express it because, let's be honest, the bell curve of humanity is not very smart. IQ 90 to 100 is not a lot of brain power compared to people like you and I who make our entire lives about the pursuit of the intellectual and the spiritual. And most people that are pushed away and led into um, identifying as a racial identitarian or the more kind of basic radical Christian nationalist type of people, I don't really think that the ones I came across were bad people. They just didn't have any other way to express it other than I don't like group A, B, and C because they get a pat on the head from the powers that be and I get told I'm a piece of shit. And that was pretty much the complaint of every one of these so-called far-right radicals or racists I could come across is they were like normal bell curve white folks that were tired of being shit on by everyone and were tired of the schools and the media telling them that they were evil for raising their kids Christian. That was pretty much 100% of all of the so-called white nationalists and neo-Nazis I came across. Occasionally I would come across, a 1488er that was big into swastikas and stuff, but they all seemed like 14-year-old kids that just wanted to be edgelords to me. None of them seemed like serious adults with families, so I don't know how much of that was just internet edgelord shit or not. But it really goes along with what we were just talking about, how it's sort of counterproductive and has the opposite effect. The more that you try to silence and take away someone's right, the more they realize they need it and they rally around it. And that's sort of where I got to with nationalism, as I started to realize I'm not a white nationalist, but I am an American constitutionalist nationalist. So that sort of makes me in the same general ideological camp as a Western chauvinist or a constitutional libertarian and those kind of people. So that's what I've spent the last year really digging into and trying to learn about. So that's why nationalism versus globalism has been on my mind a lot lately. I know that was kind of a
Oh,
tangent.
for
I'm
sure.
sorry, but it
No,
just reminded me of
that's
that
perfectly fine.
experience, and I wanted to share that with you and the listeners.
Oh no, no. Like I noticed before with certain people, I hear these ideas. I'm just like, it's because I was quite a I wouldn't use the word spiteful as a child. Actually, to be fair, I was quite spiteful. But I would never, I would not necessarily accept what somebody said. You know
Hmm.
those kids who constantly ask why,
Yeah, that's how I was too. I was very
and
skeptical.
yeah, and it gets to the point, and whether it be people in politics or certain individuals, and then you research them, and I'm just like, and quite often you get to the point where you're like, really? This
Yeah,
guy, like, you end up finding something. It's like, this is child's play.
yeah,
They think this is bad. Geez, just go on this website. They'll be in for. They'll be. Just go to this website. But
yeah.
let's see how they handle
People
this.
from social media and people from like California bubbles, they think that uttering the N word as part of a joke or a song lyric is problematic. They would die of a heart attack if they spent 5 minutes reading shit on Poll.
Well, I was just going to say 4chan in general.
Yeah, but Poll specifically, like they would die of shock after looking at Poll for 5 minutes.
Oh yeah, but then we're desensitized, and therefore potential individuals who will become extremists and cause trouble,
See,
as
I,
they
I
would
think
say.
desensitized is almost is kind of a useless word and only a dog whistle for leftists because to me, being desensitized is what they call being exposed and having healthy exposure to things. Like, you wouldn't call someone who's a trauma surgeon desensitized to human suffering, but they're desensitized to human suffering because they have to put on their game face and do medical procedures and surgeries on people that come in screaming or unconscious from horrible wounds and having their legs ripped off by farm equipment. So it's like, if you
Yeah,
want to be a well-rounded philosopher, you need to confront the ugliness, the darkness, and the extremes of the human experience because that's what you deal with. That's what you delve into. And I don't feel like I've been quote unquote radicalized, and I definitely don't feel like I'm desensitized to human suffering just because I've gone out of my way for the last couple of years to learn the extreme that the media warns me about. If anything, I feel like I have a much more holistic, healthier view of the very people that they identify with those that they villainize with those labels.
yeah. I mean, a good example of this is like, to give you a boomer example of this topic. It's like when Mortal Kombat was on the scene and how so many boomers in Congress were trying to get it banned.
Yeah, back in like '95 or whatever, I remember that. Yeah,
92, yeah, and it was
yeah,
just
so, yeah,
ridiculous.
whatever
And
it
they were
was.
trying to
Yeah,
say and these are not toys. These have dangerous psychological effects on people, and you're going to create a generation of murderers. And I'm
yeah.
just
I
like,
saw I saw a funny meme a few years ago. I forget what the incident was, but it was a meme of somebody
uh,
rolling their eyes, looking at like they had just looked at their watch, and it said, "Well, it's been a couple of years. It's time for the government to say video games are responsible for violence again."
well, I mean, the big one who said that in terms of the early days of YouTube was Jack Dawson,
Yeah,
no, Jack Thompson, sorry,
yeah, I
who
remember.
was like the classic, yeah, who was the classic boomer who tried getting Rockstar sued for GTA 4 and
Yeah,
Microsoft sued,
didn't Jim
Bungie at
Sterling
the
do a
time
video
sued
on
with
him
them.
like 6 years ago or something? Like, I used to watch
Might
Sterling
have like
back before he became an insufferable
anyone.
leftist.
I mean, who had anyone who was respectively big back in like the early days of YouTube spoke about Jack Thompson, and not just on
Yeah,
YouTube, but on other websites, especially gaming websites.
but I think it was
They
I think it
talked
was
about
I think it was an
how
old Jim video I saw about that, but this was years ago now.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah,
Could have been Angry
but that's
Joe.
the
I don't
funny
know.
thing. Might have been, but it just that sort of thing, and it makes me laugh how you take that type of argument, you just put a fresh coat of paint, and they'll just throw it, and it's just something else
It's the same
to
shit.
another group. Oh, these exactly same feces, different day.
Yep.
I'm just like, guys, it didn't work the first time. What makes you think it's going to work the 30th time? Like, I mean, if it's like if you like, and this kind of goes back to my point about the mirror test.
Uh-huh.
If these people truly believed these things, what they say about video games, well, then the movie industry screwed, the music industry screwed. And
Yeah.
especially to the boomers, their own personal ideas are well and truly screwed by that same logic. I mean, how many films do you see where people are cut up to a million pieces?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's an entire genre for that. What about genres which promote adultery? Are we going to say now films that promote adultery are going to increase the likelihood of adultery now?
Or, or what about the gazillion war movies? Are we going to say that those are haram because they encourage nations to go to war?
Exactly. You know, it's just that this is what I mean by when you follow everything to its logical conclusion, you either end up with something incredibly ridiculous, or you make the person just look like a complete numbskull and they end up becoming the butt of the joke. And effectively, like you could say the idea in a sense, it's almost like a great power play in terms of politics,
Yeah.
in a sense that it can give power to somebody, but also it can take away that power. And it's completely non-discriminatory, the way it goes about. And you could say almost in a way, politically and philosophically speaking, applies one of Newton's law. If there is an equal force one way, there is an equal opposite force the opposite way. Oh, I forget how it, or something along those
Yeah.
lines. It's been
No,
a
it's
while.
for every action there's an equal and opposite
Yes,
reaction. Yeah.
yeah.
Was
You
that
could
Newton?
say
Was
in
that
a
Isaac
philosophy,
Newton that said that, I think? Or was that
might have been Newton or some, or might have been somebody else. It's been a
like I
while
said,
since I've done.
I'm bad with remembering
Yeah,
quotes and who did it. Sorry.
yeah. So yes, just stuff like that, and it's just like, well, here's a philosophical example of that on almost anything. Or as I like to call it, it's the ultimate double-edged sword.
Yeah.
The more you extend it one way, it's going to extend the other way, undiscriminatory. Now, and it's more likely to you're more likely to impale yourself before you impale somebody else.
Or even if you do impale the other person, you're going to be bleeding too, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Are you wanting to take that step?
Speaking of taking a step, we've been
Yep.
talking for over an hour on this segment, so let's go ahead and wrap it
Oh,
up.
geez, already
And
been out.
taking the
Sure thing.
step, if you would like to do the web series like I talked about, talk to me about that on Discord another day. For the listeners, if you would like us to work on something other than just chewing the fat about philosophy and politics and stuff, let me know in the comments. Do you like the idea of me and Kizza and maybe a couple of others working on a series where we apply this mirror of veritas concept and take things that we all love and care about or hold dear and really put them through the trials, put them through the ringer? Do you think that's a fun idea? Let me know in the comments if you would like to see that kind of content, or if there's a variation on the theme that you would like to see me and Kizza, or maybe more than me and Kizza, work on together, or if you'd like to work on something with us. Let me know in the comments below. As always, if you want, share the video, or this is just audio, share the podcast with others. And Kizza, do you have anything you want to close with?
Yeah. Any criticisms or ideas, please post them in the comments, and me and Yez will try and reply to them to the best of our abilities.
Absolutely. Well, with that being said, thank you as always, Kizza. You're fun to talk to, and we will see everyone next time.
No worries. No worries. Take care, all.
Cheers.